it play and call it work.
Hey everybody, Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and welcome to another video covering the new Shadow War Armageddon, aka Necromunda rebooted, Necromunda 2.0, whatever it is you want to call. Or as I know some people are complaining in certain things, not my Necromunda. But let me tell you, some people complain about that. I can't believe they changed a few things, therefore it's not my Necromunda. But in this video, we're going to set the record straight for exactly what is different between Necromunda and Armageddon. Now obviously the setting is different, so we're going to be focusing more on the rules, and then I'll talk about the campaign structure as well. So if you are a Necromunda veteran, then this video is for you, because I've combed through both of them. I've already played 4 games of it, and then I went through the entire Necromunda PDF that I could find online, and I looked at every difference that was possible between them. And I may have missed some, maybe some really small nuances, but the idea behind this is it gives a Necromunda veteran the idea of whether they want to get into Armageddon or whether they want to stick with Necromunda. It also would help if you're a new player that hasn't played either of them, then it just kind of hear a bit about how both the systems work. But either way, you're going to need obviously the rule book for Armageddon to be able to play it. So let's go right into it. Now, there's actually not a huge number of differences. I think I have 5, 10, 11 bullet points before I get to the actual campaign rules, where that is the biggest difference. But there's just little things, and some of them you can see what they're affected by, and I'll talk about that. For example, the first thing is pre-measuring is allowed. I can already hear some groans from veterans who like the idea that everybody needs to be really expert at guessing distances. And while I agree that that is fun to a certain extent, what is more fun is not saying, I'm going to shoot at that guy, oh, he's 8.5 inches away and I have an 8-inch range. That really sucks, and I'm kicking myself for not knowing that that was 8 inches. There's already enough randomness in the game. We don't have to add this extra level of barrier to entry. And heck, if you don't like that, then you and your friends can agree no pre-measuring is allowed. But this one does specifically say you can measure distances at any time of the game. So that's a big one that I know some people won't like, and other people like me really appreciate. The sustained fire die is no longer in existence, probably because they no longer produce it. It's now just a D3. Now I thought they were going to say, because a sustained fire is essentially a D3. It has 2 1s, 2 2s, 1 3, and an ammo, or a jamming one, the one that shows that your weapon got jammed when you tried to use it. And we've used these in Gorka Morka. We've acquired a bunch of them back when we were playing Gorka Morka. And I thought that was kind of fun to have that jamming thing. It makes you not necessarily want to roll your sustained fire. So essentially some weapons, they can either fire once, or you can roll this die to see how many times they can fire. But they have a chance of jamming when you do that. But in this one, they got rid of that. It's just a D3. I thought they'd say D3, and if you roll a 6, it could jam. But nope, they have a slightly different mechanic for how that works. Instead, you just roll the hits one at a time. And as soon as you roll a 6, you do your ammo checks. And if you fail it, then you can't make any of your other shots. And even if there's no targets left over for the rest of the shots, you still roll them to see if you run out of ammo as well. So they simplified that a little bit, made it just a D3 instead of a sustained fire die. Blast and template sizes, as we talked about in the unboxing video, are different. They're now the standard 40K sizes. Once again, that makes sense because they produced those, and so why change that when they would actually have to come out with a new template set? Pretty much everything in this box is, if you watch the unboxing video, the Space Marines, the Orcs, and the templates, those are all the same as what they already produce, except that the templates are red, but it probably wasn't very hard for them to just put some red dye into their plastic and print them out that way. The models in Necromunda could only fire 90 degrees in front of them. Now they can fire 360, unless they're on Overwatch. But even then, the 90 degrees has changed. It used to be that you had your model, and the 90 degrees was measured out of the front of the model. Now take that 90 degrees and put it to the back of the model, and that is actually where it can see in Overwatch. But when it's not in Overwatch, it doesn't make any mention of its facing mattering. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Like you have a lot of control over where you move your guy anyway, so it's probably not that big a deal. But they still do limit it with your Overwatch. When it comes to ballistic skill of modifiers, before it was that if your target had moved at least 10 inches, then they would get a -1 to hit against them. But a lot of things only have a 4-inch movement, so they couldn't possibly move 10 inches or more, so even if they ran. Now they made it a lot simpler. If you run, then it's -1 to hit you. And it doesn't matter how far you run. You could be like, I'm going to run 2 inches, because you never have to run your full distance, right? And maybe he's running back and forth on the spot. So he doesn't get to shoot because he ran, and you get a -1 to hit him. So even though he's only just been displaced 2 inches, it's possible that because he declared a run, he's actually like dodging back and forth. Can't hit me. Serpentine, serpentine. So just a straight up -1 to hit with run. That's why they have the run tokens. So you can remember who of your opponent's team has run, so you know which is easier to hit than others. Flesh wounds are slightly different. Basically, when a warrior goes down, in other words, when they go to 0 wounds, you roll on an injury table. On a 6, they're just out of the game. On a 2 to a 5, they count as down. There's mechanics about that, which we're not going to talk about here. If they roll a 1, they get a flesh wound. And what that does is they get -1 weapon skill and ballistic skill. Now, before, they could actually bring you down to 0. And so if your ballistic skill got to 0, then obviously you could not shoot. And if your weapon skill got to 0, then I don't think that stopped you from fighting. I think it just made it so you had a really bad modifier in close combat. But in theirs, as soon as both of them got to 0, you were out. Basically, you couldn't go any further and you're just out of action. Now they can't go below 1, so your ballistic skill and weapon skill can't be lowered below 1. However, if they're both at 1 and you suffer another flesh wound, then you're out of action. So essentially it's doing the same mechanic, except it never stops the ballistic skill and weapon skill from, it never actually goes below 1. But you are out of action if you get both of them to 0. That's important that it's both go down to 1 and then to 0 at the last moment, because otherwise orc players with ballistic skill 2, only 2 flesh wounds and they're out. Now I know that's not how it worked in Necromunda. I'm just saying that it's good that you have to have both of them get down to that. So essentially the higher of your weapon skill or ballistic skill is how many flesh wounds you can take before you're out of the game. So that's changed. Exploding weapons is much simpler. For example, throwing grenades used to be when you rolled your scatter die and your artillery die. If you got a misfire and a hit, then the grenade blew up in your hands or had some sort of mishap. They got rid of that. Now it just becomes a dud, and you count as being out of ammo for the rest of the game. But there are a lot of weapons that are unreliable. Like you think about a plasma pistol, you can overcharge it to get your strength 7, but then it becomes unreliable. And that sounds like it's a big deal, like maybe like gets hot, but it's actually not that big a deal. All unreliable does is if you have to take an ammo check, and you roll double 1 for your ammo check, which we'll talk about in a second, then it explodes. And that's it. So it's actually not that unreliable. It's just slightly unreliable should be what the rule name is. So exploding doesn't happen nearly as often. Speaking of which, we have ammo rolls on 2d6, not d6. Now the ammo number has changed. Like in Necromunda, a lot of the weapons were 4+ ammo checks on a d6. Now it's on 2d6, but they are 3+, 5+, and 7+ for the most part. So the more unreliable weapons will be 7+. They'll run out of ammo a lot easier. Essentially, when you roll the hit, if you roll any 6s, you make an ammo check. And if you fail that ammo check, then they can't fire that weapon for the rest of the game. You still resolve that one roll, because obviously you hit on a 6, most likely. And but yeah, you can run out of ammo that way. So the ammo, you don't run out of ammo quite as often, because I know playing Gorka Morka, which uses the ammo rolls like Necromunda's, that you'd be running out of ammo all the time. And in the 4 games that we played, I didn't once see anybody fail their ammo check. Not saying that it can't happen, but this just doesn't seem to happen as often. And then we have sustained shooting. We talked about a little bit with the sustained fire die. It's slightly different. Before they had limitations on who you could hit with it, but now you pick a target, and if you sustain fire and you get multiple shots, then you can resolve them one at a time. The first one has to be against the original target, but then any other shots can be against any targets within 4 inches, regardless of the modifiers to hit them. Whereas the other one said if they're behind cover, you can't choose them, or other things like that. So sustained fire is a little different than the way it used to be, but very similar. Falling damage, for whatever reason, is slightly tweaked. It's still, when you fall, you take a strength hit equal to the number of inches that you fell, and it counts as a close combat hit, so it can have armor modifiers. And that's still the case, but now if you fall at least 4 inches, if it's 4 to 6 inches, you take D3 wounds if you fail that, if you get wounded. If it's 7+ inches, then it counts as a high impact, which means when you roll on the injury chart, on a 5+, you go out of action instead of 6+. And if you fall 10 inches or more, then you're just straight out of action, whereas it used to be 12 inches. So it's a minor change. Mostly works the same, but a little more lethal to fall larger distances. So that's the main differences in the rules section. Now the big difference is in the campaign section. That is where we see tons of changes. In fact, they've essentially taken the old campaign system and threw it out the window, and they started from scratch. Now, if you are a fan of Necromunda and you love the gangs and you're disappointed that they don't exist in Armageddon, well, I've looked at it and compared points values, and points for points, they look like they totally would work the same in Armageddon. In other words, I know for us at least, because Lee, for example, has his old gang and disappointed that there's no rules for them in the new Armageddon. Right, Lee? Yeah, he's sad. He's sad, so he's just painting Nurgle bikers instead. But I looked at it, and I'm like, the points cost is still 1,000 points to build a kill team now. They don't call them gangs, they call them kill teams, for obvious reason, because it's not all gangs. And the similar structure, that you have to have a leader. There's new recruits that become regular guys. There's essentially these heavy slots. They don't call them that, but in the building your gang, you can only have 2 heavies. But in this one, so far we haven't seen a need to have more than 1 or 2 just because of how expensive they are. But so those restrictions could be lifted. But points-wise, everything looks the same. The only thing that you'd have to kind of port over is any of the weapons that don't exist in Armageddon. You have to look at their ammo rolls and then just kind of line them up. Like if it's a 4+ ammo roll, make it a 5+. If it's a 2+, make it a 3+. And if it's a 3+, no, sorry, 2+ would become 3+, 3+ would become 5+, and 4+ would become 7+. That's how I would do it, at the cursory glance at least. So that, no problem. You can totally include your gangs. I get why they didn't include rules for them, because they don't sell the models. And Games Workshop's not interested in selling somebody else's models, because essentially it would be pushing you to a third party to buy those gangs. But for us personally, we totally think that they would be cool to play. It gives a lot more flavor as well. Now the campaign system itself, in Necromunda, having played Gorka Morka, that's my big comparison. It works almost identically to Gorka Morka. Each individual gains experience for doing things like killing guys or getting loot or surviving a mission. And then they level up and they roll on a table, which then they can either gain skills or gain attributes. And then you gain income, pretty much exactly like Gorka Morka in the sense that there's a limit to how much you can gain, and then you can spend that income to buy new guys or upgrade the guys that you have, or to buy new areas in the hive. So in Gorka Morka, there's your fort that you're upgrading. In this, you kind of like expand your territories and all of that. That whole system is not there. Instead, they replaced it with a much, much, much simpler campaign system. This is probably my biggest beef with the game. I don't like how simple the campaign system is. I enjoy a more complex campaign system because this one doesn't account for a lot of things. Like, for example, if you lose, you're collecting Prometheum caches, essentially. If you lose or draw a game, you gain a cache. If you win the game, you gain D3 caches. So you could just gain the same amount as losing or drawing. And in the missions, there's usually ways to gain bonus caches as well. The first kill team to get 15 caches and then win a game wins their campaign. Now they say you can change that to 20 or 8 or 10, depending on how long you want it to go. But the thing I don't like about that is that you can spend those Prometheum caches to get more points to spend on your kill team. But if you spend them, then you're not building them up in order to be able to win the campaign. Whereas in Necromunda and Gorka Morka, you gain income, which you spend on your gang, or in Gorka Morka on your warband, or whatever you want to call it. And the first person to get their warband rating up to a certain amount, I think is in Gorka Morka's terms, it's 400 teeth, and they would retire that gang. You don't necessarily say that they won the campaign, because you can have it go on forever. But they would retire it, it's too powerful, and they start a new one from scratch. Furthermore, because there's a gang rating, you can actually have 2 gangs go up against each other in Necromunda that are of different strengths, and the underdog gets a bunch of bonus experience because of that, even if they lose. And if they win, they gain even more bonus experience and bonus income for beating somebody who's better than them. In Armageddon, there's no mechanic for that. So if you have a brand new 1,000-point team and you go up against a veteran player who's already built theirs up to like worth something around 1,500, there's no advantages to you to go up against that. So they're just going to be able to beat you a lot easier. And so the rich get richer, the strong get stronger kind of mentality. Furthermore, because if you spend your Prometheum, you delay being able to win the campaign, it encourages you to stockpile your cash rather than spending it. Whereas in Gorka Morka and in the Necromunda one as well, if you stockpiled your money, it didn't add to your value. So you actually had to spend it in order for you to increase in your value. So there was an ebb and flow there that I think this one is lacking. I can see that they just wanted to make it simpler. There's no experience system. Instead, you just choose one of your surviving guys after the game, and he gets to upgrade. And that's really it. And your new recruits, they have to survive 3 games before they become a full-fledged member, and they get to upgrade, whereas before they'd have to gain a certain amount of experience. So, not a big fan of that. The skill tree is very similar. Most of the same skill trees are there. Even a lot of the names of the skills are there. There's a ton of tweaks amongst them. I haven't actually read through them individually. I've compared a bunch of them just to see how much they aligned up. And I can see that they basically, it looks like they took the old skills, they moved it over, and then they changed them all to make it make sense with the fact that you're no longer just playing with gangs, and maybe just to tidy up the rules as well. And so that's kind of cool. I like this. The skill system is nice and granular enough for me, meaning that it has a lot of options. And so I'm glad they didn't simplify that, because that would have disappointed me immensely. The serious injury table too is very simplified. It's on a D6 rather than D66. And so that can make a big difference. Things survive a lot easier now. It's pretty much on a 4+. They're okay. Whereas before it was a lot harder to be okay when you died. So it's a lot less brutal when it comes to the serious injuries as well. That I can't say that I'm a fan of or against. I'm more neutral in that area. A serious injury tree is a serious injury tree. If you want to make the campaign feel more brutal, then do it that way. If you don't want it to be that harsh, then don't do it that way. To me, that's just a flavor. Whereas the whole idea of the campaign having a very simple economy is not something I like. I like the more complexity in that area. So if you love the old Necromunda campaign system, then that's not really here. But once again, having looked at it, we're going to play at first the new campaign system because we just got the game, and so I'm not going to start going and making all sorts of tweaks to it. But once we go through it once, I have a funny feeling I'm going to be doing revamping it, or even just using the old Necromunda campaign system in order to play one with slight tweaks to the income system, just because of how we film our battle reports as well. So that has changed big time. And of course, the big change is all the armies that they are including. In the box, you have rules for Space Marine Scouts and Astra Militarum Veteran Guardsmen, as well as a little Orc Boys warband. And they're going to be adding a lot more. I'm not sure when the PDF will come out. Maybe by the time you see this video, there will be a PDF. They will be posting the rules for free on their website for a lot of other factions. And the ones that I know so far are Necrons, Harlequins, Dark Eldar, Neophytes from the Genestealer Occult, Tyrannid Warriors, specifically from the Tyranids. So you'll actually have a kill team of 3 to 5 Tyrannid Warriors. Chaos, I think there's going to be both Cultists and Space Marines, but don't quote me on that. Tau, Grey Knights, and Mechanicum. Actually a mix of the Admech and the Skitarii. And so those are the ones I know of so far. And it's quite possible by the time you're watching this video that they've published a PDF, or that they've announced more of them, or exactly what they're going to be. But in other words, most likely you can take your existing collection and use it to play this. All you need are the rules for it. And hopefully they'll digitally release the rules for it as well. And like I said, split up the box and eventually sell the components separately, if they'll do that. They got to do it at least for the terrain. There's no way that they're not going to sell this terrain separately. It's too good a kit to reserve it only to this box. So there's our rundown of the differences between Necromunda and Armageddon. Right now, there is another battle report for our Vault viewers that you can click on the link in the video description below to go and watch it right now. So that's your bonus for being a Vault member. If you're not a Vault member, no worries. Still click the link. You can get a 7-day free trial to the Vault, get instant access to that battle report, plus all the other Vault Armageddon battle reports that we've already published, and the thousands of other videos in the MiniWarGaming Vault. All for free for 7 days, and hopefully you'll like it and stick around, because that is what supports us and allows us to pay our painting monkey back here. Come on, monkey. Be a monkey. And feed my children, too. That's important as well to me. And so thank you so much to our Vault members for helping us to do just that. All right, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more Armageddon coverage. Go watch the next battle report. Enjoy that. We're going to have so much fun with this. Happy wargaming.